Good morning, OVLC middle school students. This is Mr. Woolley, and today we're going to be working on lesson 16 in our Eureka math, applying the properties of operations to multiply and divide rational numbers. Remember, the information contained in this video is intended to be viewed only by the students in Mr. Woolley's class. By watching the video, you agree that you will not record or share the video with anyone who's not a student in Mr. Woolley's classroom. All right, now before we get started today, we're going to get to some multi-step multiplication and division problems today. And we're going to have more than just two numbers to work with. So here's kind of our rules we've already learned. If you have one negative sign in a multiplication or division problem, it's a negative answer. If you have two negative signs in a multiplication or division problem, it's a positive answer. Now what if there's more? 3 would be a negative answer. 4 negative signs, these would be a positive answer. So essentially, it's going to keep following that pattern. If there's an odd number of negative signs in the problem, it's going to be a negative answer. But there's an even number of negative signs, it'll be a positive answer. All right, now what we're going to do today is show you just some strategies for how to sometimes group some parts together inside a multi-step problem to kind of help yourself out. So right here, you can see there's a whole bunch of numbers. There's 5 numbers you're going to try to multiply together. Well, I do notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 negative signs. 4 negative signs means it's going to be a positive answer, so I don't even have to worry about any of those negative signs anymore. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to group together, remember, ignore the negative signs, 6 times 2, and I get 12. I group together here, this is one of my big ones. 2 times 5, I'm going to get a 10. I love multiplying things by 10, which you'll see why in a little bit. Then I have just a times 3 hanging out here. All right, so if I did that 6 times 2 and I get 12, 5 times 2 got 10, and I got a 3 just hanging out. That leaves me with 12 times 10 times 3. Well, I do know that if I take 12 times 3, it gives me 36. And then if I take any number times 10, I just add a 0 to the end of it. So 36 times 10 is 360. So just trying to find some numbers that worked well together, and you can do more of these steps in your head. So types of strategies, well, try to get tens if possible. Try to find numbers that fit well together. All right, let's try another one here. I have 5 numbers again to multiply. And I got 1, 2, 3 negative signs, so I know it's going to be a negative sign. It's going to be in front of my answer. Now, I can take like a 1 times 3. I'm going to leave that 10 alone for just a minute because I like multiplying by 10s. And then I got a 2 times 2, and there's going to be a 4. Now notice how I don't have any negative signs in here anymore because I've already made my decision what my answer is going to be. So I can just focus on just the integers themselves. So obviously anything times 1 is just itself. So it's 3, and I got 2 times 2 is a 4 over here, and I'll leave this 10 to the end. 3 times 4 does give me 12 if I do that part first. And then if I multiply 12 times 10, I just add a 0 to the 12, 120. But don't forget, we did decide there was going to be a negative answer on this one, so negative 120. All right, now what do we do when we have like some of these fractions involved? Well, there's still a couple strategies we haven't showed you yet. First of all, I see there's 2 negatives, so I know it's going to be a positive answer here. So there's a negative, negative, so it's a positive answer, so I don't have to worry about any negative signs anymore in this problem. But what I want to do is find fractions that fit well together. Like 1/3 times 9. Think of it as a third of 9. If you could split 9 up 3 equal ways, they each be 3. Or half of 8. I can split 8 in half and I get 4. Whereas if I tried using 1/3 of 8, I can't split 8 up into thirds evenly, and I can't even split 9 into halves very equally. So anyways, without using decimals, I try to get whole numbers if possible here. So a third of 9 gave me 3, and a half of 8 gave me 4. So now what that left then, is notice how I took a third times the 9. I can multiply any order I want because they're all multiplication. And then 8, half of 8 gives me a 4. So I'm left with the 4 out front times a 3 times a 4. And I can just do 4 times 3 to give me 12. And 12 times 4 gives me 48 for my answer there. So trying to find fractions that fit well together and work well together, they're compatible. That can be a big help sometimes to avoid having to work with fractions, and we can use some of it with mental math. All right, now on the next page here, example 2 is on page 84. What they want us to do is rewrite that mixed number as a sum, then multiply using the distributive property. Now, I have a negative number times a positive mixed number. So one negative sign means it's going to be a negative answer, so I don't want to forget that at the end. But what I'm going to do is break it down to 2 parts. I'm going to have it broke down to a 6 times 5 and a 6 times a third. Now, how did I get there because of that? Right here. I broke that 5 1/3 apart into 5 plus 1/3. It's still 5 1/3. And now I could just take 6 times 5. I got a 30 from that. 6 times 1/3. Well, 1/3 of 6, if I could split 6 up 3 equal ways, it's going to be 2. And then together, 30 and 2 make 32. And just don't forget that we decided it was going to be negative, so it's a negative answer there. All right, exercise 5 here on the bottom of page 84. I can take 9 times a mixed number without having to break it all apart sometimes and work with improper fractions and how I've been working with them in the past. I have a positive times a negative, so I know it's a negative answer. So no big deal there, stick a negative sign at the end. What I'm going to do is kind of like last time. I'm going to break that 3 1/2 apart into 3 plus 1/2. And then I can hit 9 times 3, and I get 27. 9 times a half, well, a half of 9 is going to be 4 1/2. And if I add those together, add my little chunks together here, 27 plus 4 1/2 gives me 31 1/2 for my final answer. Remember, it's negative, negative 31 1/2. All right, just a couple more problems here. This one's a little different here because they actually have it split up into 2 parts. I have this chunk, 16 times 3/8, and I have 16 times a 4th. Well, what I'm going to do is, obviously I'm using 16 to distribute to each of those. Let's work backwards just a little bit. Originally, this is what the problem might have looked like. 16 times some things in parentheses. Well, if I take a negative 3/8 plus a 1/4, I can actually work with that real quick and make that 1/4 turn into 2/8. That way I have common denominators to work with. A negative 3/8 plus a positive 2/8. More negatives than positives, and 3 minus 2 is 1. So negative 1/8 is what I get if I put those fractions together. And positive times a negative means it's going to result in a negative answer here. And 1/8 of 16, 1/8 times 16, well, if you split 16 into 8 equal parts, you each get 2. So it's going to be 2, but a negative 2, because we decided up here is going to be a negative answer. All right. Now, sometimes you actually get into problems that require you to do a little division also. So 1 divided by 2/3 times a negative 8 times a 3 divided by a negative 1/2. Well, let's keep change flip anytime I see a division problem here. So instead of 1 divided by 2/3, 1 times 3/2 times a negative 8 times 3, and keep change flip, change to a times, flip it to negative 2/1, or just negative 2. And now I see there's 2 negatives, so I know I'm going to have a negative. Those 2 negatives there, it results in a positive answer. So I don't have to worry about negative signs anymore. And you know what? I don't have to worry about 1 times anything either, because 1 times anything doesn't affect at all. Now, 3/2 times, what worked best here? Well, you can pick and choose whatever order you want to pair these up with, because it's just all multiplication. 3/2 times 2. Well, 3 times 2 gives me 6 over 2 times 1, technically. It gives me 2 in the bottom. 6/2 is just known as 3. So there's my 3 right there. I still got the 8, still got the 3. And I can do 3 times 3 real quick. That's 9. And 9 times 8 gives me 72. That's a positive answer. All right, one more to go here. We're just going to take a look at one last problem. Similar to last time, I do notice that's all multiplication division. I'm going to take that division and make it a keep, change, flip kind of scenario. So 4.2 times negative 1/3, change it to times, flip it to 6/1, and times by 10. Now there are 2 negatives here, so I know it's going to be a positive answer. So you notice I didn't even have any negatives in here right now. Now, 1/3 of 6. If I could split 6 3 equal ways, I get a 2. All right. Now, I got a 4.2 times a 2 times a 10. Well, if I have a 10, I can just technically slide the decimal 1 place. 4.2 times 10 is 42. 42 times 2 is 84. All right, so I do have a few problems, not quite as difficult as some of these ones were, for you to look at in Schoology. So go ahead and give those a try in your practice. Thanks for watching.